Welcome to Saturday's Warrior. I'm Trevor, and joining me is Calvin, who is the host of the Oklahoma State podcast, the CGA Tour, soon to be rebranded, so I'm told. And he's also the host of the Big 12 College Huddle. Both of us, obviously, members of the College Huddle. Welcome, Calvin.
Thanks so much, Trevor. Glad to join you, of course. And yeah, there will be a rebrand coming here at some point soon. Because initially I was like, "Hey, I'm Bill Simmons." When I graduated from college at a ripe young 24 years old, and was caught talking about everything and anything under the sun. But now we're all Oklahoma State sports, some Big 12 stuff just mixed in. So the rebrand on the way here to get a little bit more in line with that.
All right. Well, big aspirations, Bill Simmons there, but yeah, I'm not quite on that level or with you on that level. But nonetheless, if you are a BYU fan or if you're joining us for the Big 12 content or just college football in general, please like this video, subscribe to the channel. We like to, yes, cover a lot of BYU, but also realignment, cover Big 12, the whole landscape of college football. So be sure to subscribe and come back and catch all that additional content that we do. Now, having said that, tonight we are going to be talking about realignment and how it impacts the Big 12. Now, Big 12 most likely isn't going to be in the middle of realignment, at least not until some other things potentially happen. And so we want to start talking about this Memphis's offer, the instability of the ACC, and how all of that surrounding the Big 12 is going to impact the Big 12. And then we also want to take a look at the Big 10 and the SEC, both coming off of their media days, and had some interesting quotes. And so we want to take a look at those and what their respective stances mean for the future of college football and where it leaves Big 12. So before we get into that, though, Calvin, I want to ask you, how has the Big 12 summer been, and how are they set up for this upcoming season?
Well, the Big 12 summer's been, I'd say, newsworthy of some sorts here. I think the Big 12 did a good job of returning Big 12 Media Days back to the Lone Star State, or at least back into Big 12 territory. It was in Vegas last year because the Cowboys situation was being redone, or they had a concert going on or something. But this year it's back at AT&T, so it looked great. Of course, it's great being back in that area of the country, but yeah, there was just a lot going on. Deion Sanders had a health scare this offseason that we all learned about, I think, just a week or two ago. Had a cancer battle he overcame. Then Garce BYU, you guys, his quarterback, Jake Retzlaff, transfers to Tulane with a bunch of other turmoil going on in the background there. That, hey, heads or tails, I don't know what what to make out of the whole situation there, but he definitely transferred, and it's not out of BYU anymore. You've got Sam Levitt, who's preseason Big 12 quarterback, who last year was a freshman, but of course took Arizona State to college football playoffs. And then, the rest of the Big 12 here, you've got basically everyone jumbled up. I mean, who's going to lead the pack besides Arizona State? Is it going to be K-State? Do they finally take that step? Is BYU good enough on the rest of the whole entire team to take that next step and to also have a quarterback who's there as well? BYU got a 5-star quarterback, this offseason as well, too, I think for next year. Oklahoma State's quarterback room is completely figured out and undecided. We have a wide receiver who's the only guy on the roster who's thrown a touchdown in Boone Pickens Stadium. He's a transfer coming in from Auburn. So there's just a bunch of just crazy stuff going on. And, Rich Rodriguez is back in Morgantown, West Virginia. You've got, man, it seems like you've just got a bunch of new stuff going on in the Big 12 here. So a lot of fascinating, a lot of great stuff. And lastly here, Memphis was trying to join the Big 12 and they got denied. So a bunch of cool stuff here.
Yeah, so we'll get to Memphis. I think with the Big 12 is, I mean, some people say it's the deepest conference or it's not, whatever. Obviously, the SEC has a lot of powerhouses and there's a lot of depth there. So I don't know. It depends. We certainly don't have the same brands anymore as the SEC, but the Big 12, it depends on how you're looking at depth, though. Because I think in terms of parity, I think the Big 12 definitely has the most parity of any other league. And if that's how you're describing depth, now, obviously the SEC is a little bit more top heavy, but then they still certainly have some of their weaker brands down at or teams down at the bottom. The Big Ten is definitely top heavy, even with the additions of the Pac schools, and then the ACC. I mean, there's just not a whole lot of depth there. So, yeah, I love where the Big 12 is. Definitely one of the more entertaining leagues. However, it does leave the conference in a precarious situation because, well, one thing I do think the Big 12 is pretty stable for the most part from realignment because the biggest brands have gone, and the biggest brands out there are that are still kind of up for grabs are not in the Big 12, which means the Big 12 is kind of on even footing. It's almost good that our biggest brands, Texas and OU, were the first to leave because that allowed the Big 12 to kind of get the best of the rest before everybody else. Because had USC and UCLA left first, maybe the Pac starts backfilling with Big 12 schools. And then you get Texas and OU leaving. And then the Big 12 is in a lot weaker position if it had already lost maybe a couple of its best remaining brands, or however that could have played out. And so, Texas and OU leaving first almost was a blessing in disguise for the Big 12 and just being able to get its footing in this whole realignment landscape. And so in that sense, Big 12 is in better shape than some conferences. Certainly, the schools that got in, we're talking about the BYU, Cincinnati, UCF, and Houston are definitely got that lifeline. They got in early, and the remaining spots on that live draft are filling up as schools like SMU and Memphis, schools that didn't quite make the cut last time around, are starting to see, and they're doing whatever they can to get into one of these power conferences because they know those spots are getting full, and once they're taken, like there's not going to be enough room for them. And so, what do you make of this move by Memphis to not just forego revenue like SMU, but actually bring in additional revenue and pay its way into the Big 12?
I think it's a little bizarre because the one thing that I'm not seeing a ton of people talk about with the whole SMU versus Memphis is SMU was willing to not take payments. Memphis was willing to add payments, and then also at the end of it go, hey, still if you don't like us a couple 5 years down the line, there won't be any penalty. Like we'll just be gone. Like we won't be in the Big 12 anymore if you don't like us 5 years later. But 5 years is such a long leash, and I understand that's when the new TV contract is in place, that it's almost too long. If you're if you're part of the conference for 5 years, then are you really ever going to leave? I mean, unless something happens, like if North Carolina wants to come, well, we'll take North Carolina over Memphis every day of the week, of course. But is that really a possibility? It just seems like we're at this point headed for like a 40-team kind of super conference, or there'll be some dissolving of the ACC, and then all those teams will be just trying to grab any power type of conference they can. All of a sudden it'll be Georgia Tech to the Big 12 if Georgia Tech doesn't go to the SEC, etc. And the one other thing here is that Memphis, it was $200 million they were going to bring into the Big 12 in sponsorship revenue. And I'm not saying Memphis couldn't get this $200 million in sponsorship revenue from FedEx like tomorrow. I mean, it's a FedEx arena that they play in that they share with the Memphis Grizzlies. It's almost FedEx Field, where they play now, but it's just it's actually the home of the AutoZone Liberty Bowl, where a Big 12 team always plays in every single year. Shout out to Taylor Cornelius and Oklahoma State playing back there in 2018, I want to say 2019. But still beating Drew Lock at the time, which is great. But still, I just think there's more to that. There's more to the $200 million being like a Big 12 money kind of grab. I don't think $200 million in sponsorship revenue here would have just done a ton for all Big 12 teams, because each team right now is going, yeah, we've got $20 million just been an NIL funds period amongst all sports. So already 10% of that $200 million that was going to go and be split amongst each school would be gone within seconds anyways. It wasn't $2 billion is this thing I want to get. $200 million is a lot of money. Not saying it's not, but it's also when each school is already going to be spending $20 million in sports year over year, is $200 million such a big number that's just changing the whole landscape of the Big 12? And I don't think it is.
No, you're right. When you break that down over 5 years, 16 ways, it's what does it come out? A couple, maybe 2 million a year, right? And so, never do math live while you're going. I
Yeah.
shouldn't do mental math like that. But that's not earth-shattering money. Yes, it's a lot of money. Yes, it would help the schools. Yes, they could do things with it. It's not really closing the gap between them and the Big Ten and the SEC. And so then the other part of that is, okay, you're bringing in Memphis. Are they going to bring a lot in terms of football? Probably not. Like they're a decent football program, but look at what happened to Cincy coming off a playoff berth. Let's look at UCF, who's had a lot of success, and Houston been up and down. But like they've all struggled coming into the conference. BYU struggled their first year in the conference as well, and so I mean that's natural to happen. But those other three coming in from the American, and you have to wonder, well, what would Memphis be able to do? Yes, they bring in value because of basketball, but do they bring in more value than a Gonzaga or a UConn, who the Big 12 already said no to? Granted, they weren't bringing a paycheck with them. And the answer is probably not. A great basketball brand, but probably not on the level with those two that have kind of like started. Well, I'd say UConn now is officially a blue blood. I think they've earned that now. Gonzaga's kind of right there on that next tier, and maybe Memphis is too. But um, yeah, so you have to look at that like, okay, is it worth it? And then there is that clause where they'd be able to kick them out at the end of it and say, hey, if we don't feel like you're valuable enough, you're gone. And then they could at least have been in the Big 12. They've shot their shot. They did their best. And that makes a lot of sense for Memphis. I applaud them for making the effort. My thing for the Big 12 is there's a perception problem. Is already we don't have all the brands. And then I think bringing in, four schools. And now I think BYU is a little bit different. I think they were better positioned than than the AAC schools that came in. Now just the American, but um, but there is that perception of, oh, you backfilled with these other schools. I mean, look at how excited the Big 12 was to add Colorado. Yes, they had Deion Sanders, but like Colorado had been terrible. We're talking terrible. They'd been the doormat of the Pac-12, and we were excited when it was just Colorado. And I think it showed that, hey, people are choosing Big 12 over Pac-12. We had that rivalry. It was some of it was kind of a I told you so, but it also showed like, hey, this is a power program, maybe a bad one, but a power program coming into our conference. And so I think that does make a big difference, bringing in another school, even if they are, maybe the next one, two, or three, schools that were kind of missed the cut. And so still a solid program. I still think that's going to be viewed as, kind of a knock against the Big 12 if they were to take Memphis.
Yeah, I mean, the Big 12 got the same amount of teams in cultural playoffs last year that the group of 5 did. ACC got in 2, and really it just comes down to tiebreakers. Like the Big 12 kind of just ate itself too well. I mean, the ACC, they had, they had SMU, and oh my gosh, I'm forgetting and Clemson. And the Big 12 got Arizona State. We had home field, for Arizona State. Technically speaking, they had the bye. It just is also so bizarre to me because you're right. It is a perception issue of, okay, is Arizona State or UCF like a nationwide brand? Probably not. But like I'm talking about two schools that have some of the biggest populations of any college in the United States. It's really, I would say by the Big 12 adding Arizona State, Arizona, those are easy and great moves from the former Pac-12 being a power conference. But adding UCF from the American and adding Memphis are just night and day difference here. And in the facilities, UCF is putting a ton of money into the school and a ton of money into the facilities. They just did this offseason year two, $130 million into their facility program as well. And UCF has the student population where if all of a sudden they just keep going up in student population, it's gonna be hard to deny them in their brand new facilities. They're gonna have so many more chances of having a donor just pop off and become like a billionaire and all of a sudden give a bunch of NIL funds as well too. And then the one team I haven't even mentioned is Texas Tech decided just to spend every dollar they could in the NIL. Like they spent all the money in the entire world with Patrick Mahomes and the other guy who's a billionaire there for Texas Tech's NIL program to get the pitcher basically in softball, and took him all the way College World Series. And now they're spending all this money getting all these transfers in, especially on the defensive line here for Texas Tech. Is that going to make a difference? Is that going to be what puts the Big 12 over the hump here and really is like a sticking point of, okay, got the stamp of approval, the Big 12 is better than the ACC? Because right now, I'd be interested to poll Big 10 and SEC fans, say, which do you think is a better conference top to bottom, Big 12 or ACC? I would assume a lot of them would say the Big 12 because last year you've got so much parity where this year the Big 12 goes, we're not doing a preseason bowl because last year was so wrong and they did Arizona State last. And of course, they won the conference and had Oklahoma State number one and Utah two and K State three, I believe. And then it basically flipped, except for K State ended up being okay. So there's so much just 9-day difference here between the ACC and the Big 12 and the amount of parity in the conference. But the ACC does have a couple of really great blue brand type of blood, names here where I'm talking like North Carolina, Florida State, and teams where I've seen a couple different social media videos this offseason of no one's talking about how Oklahoma State's fall from grace from year one of making a Big 12 championship game to next year of not winning a Big 12 game. I'm like, well, yeah, of course we're going to talk more about Florida State and their fall from grace because they had a 5-star quarterback in DJ Uiagalelei. And then, of course, they just didn't return a bunch of their NFL guys. And it's Florida State. They're a bigger brand than Oklahoma State. Not by night and day, but like they're a bigger brand than Oklahoma State. They've had more recent Heisman winners, been to, bigger games since then. But Oklahoma State's like, all right, if you dig into it, makes sense why we, were bad last year. And there's writing was on the wall the year before we went 10-4. So there's just so much more hope I have. The Big 12 is covered a lot more by either maybe it's Fox Sports and not ESPN. I don't know. ESPN seems all over SEC. Fox Sports seems all over the Big Ten, and then ESPN has that deal with ACC. Where's the Big 12 kind of slide in all of this? It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I want to get to what you're saying about the big brands in the ACC, and so that is what makes, as I was saying earlier, the Big 12 gets in a more stable position because the ACC is kind of the next one to go, right? We had Big 12 was rated, then the Pac 12 completely decimated, and now the ACC is the next one. And while they were able to come to a conclusion, or at least a temporary solution to kind of appease those biggest brands, it made the conference more unstable because now there's a path for those brands to get out of the conference. And so and we're starting to hear rumblings of, again, we thought it was going to be quiet until, we got closer to 2030 when all the TV deals are up and people would, all of a sudden that buyout of the ACC wouldn't be so much money that those biggest brands would get out and be able to go join either the Big Ten or SEC in whatever combination. But I think that a lot of the assumption is, which is another reason why the Big 12 may not want to take a Memphis, UConn, a Gonzaga right now, is that you're keeping spots open for whoever is left from the ACC. And these aren't scrubs. I mean, there are some solid brands in there. A lot of, the schools I think that are most talked about are a Louisville, a Pitt, Virginia Tech, NC State, even Georgia Tech. A lot of these schools that are, thought maybe positioned that could potentially find a home in the SEC or Big Ten, but most likely would be left behind. But in many ways would be a good fit for the Big 12, and be a great pairing for our Eastern members of the conference already, namely West Virginia, who's been looking for some more travel partners for a long time. So my question for you, though, is we've seen the ACC, and granted, you're a Big 12 guy, so maybe you can't answer this, but something that occurred to me is, so the ACC had made all these concessions to its biggest brands based on, extra revenue and things based on TV ratings and whatnot. Of course, they also get extra games with Notre Dame, which is going to boost their ratings. And so, it's all a crock, but it was basically to try to appease them. But let's say those biggest brands leave, the FSU, the Clemson, whoever, and now all of a sudden Louisville's looking around and saying, hey, we're one of the biggest brands. We're getting the most ratings now. And while Big 12 is pretty stable, the ACC is now stable because our big brands left. We're not losing more brands. We are who we are. And we actually have a chance to go out there and bring in other schools that we want to join us and strengthen our ranks. And so, again, the talk is often, hey, the Big 12's got to be open for business, right? The your mark quote. But if the ACC start looking around and saying, Louisville all of a sudden is saying, hey, or whoever else, I know they get good ratings, but whoever else those other schools are, maybe NC State's like, hey, we're the top brand in North Carolina now in the ACC or whatever. Like, maybe it makes sense financially for them to stay in those situations. Could you actually foresee a situation where the ACC is able to poach off Big 12 schools? And if so, who do you think might be likely to go if that were the case?
Um, yeah, I can definitely see it happening. I could easily see it being. I think West Virginia would be one of the first to go. I think West Virginia would really love to be in a conference that has Pittsburgh. They played them as many times as they can in as many sports as they can for the proximity and for the rivalries. But beyond West Virginia, Cincinnati, they've got a lot of natural rivals there. Louisville would love to be playing them, and of course, Louisville would love to be playing West Virginia again as well too. And then I could see UCF, and then all of a sudden you're kind of creeping west a little bit. There's a void in the Big 12 between basically those three Eastern time zone schools and everyone else in the Central time zone and the Mountain time zone, and I guess Arizona is just its own time zone. But yeah, I would think it'd be easily those top three: Cincinnati, West Virginia, and UCF would be the first three. I mean, UCF is the biggest student population in the Big 12. I know I keep bringing that up, but to me, that is really the high point in some of these colleges of like why you want to attract them, why you want to bring them into your conference, because they have so many bites of the apple of guys and gals who could be big donors, big media plays, all type of stuff here, and just bring in more money. Because we've seen year over year, that's what drives every single thing. Everyone's worried about how much money anyone's getting paid and how the money works, all type of stuff, and how it works as far as you know basically dollars that turn on to on the field production. And so I got to think it'd be those three first, and then after that, it's I would say a lot of other colleges in the Big 12 are all paired up. So then are you taking TCU and Baylor, or are you just taking Houston, and then maybe you're going Oklahoma State and Texas Tech, or you're going KU and K State at that point. It would seem wild for the ACC to have Arizona and Arizona State, but they already have Cal and Stanford. So what's it to them? At that point for travel distances and kind of for the geography. But yeah, I would think it would be those three for sure. West Virginia, Cincinnati, and UCF would be the first three to join the ACC if the situation unfolded.
Yeah. I wonder too if, someone like Utah who thinks that they're getting this, they're a shoe in to get an invite to the Big Ten, which I just don't see. I don't think it's like impossible to happen. I'm sure they are on the list of schools that the Big Ten will consider. BYU, as great of a brand as it is, just doesn't fit a lot of what the Big Ten wants in its schools, so that's fine. Utah checks some more of those boxes, but I think they're lower on the list than some of the other schools if the Big Ten does start looking out west again. If they do, I could see them first going after like an Arizona State, who is AAU as well. As you've mentioned, huge student body base, big state, all that. Utah is in a growing market, but there's reasons to add some of these other schools before they get down to Utah. Then it's a question of how big does the Big Ten really want to get, and are there enough slots for them to then get to the point where they're ready to take Utah? But if Utah doesn't get that Big Ten invite, maybe they'd be looking to go to the ACC. Maybe the Arizona schools are thinking, hey, we can go with Stanford and Cal, be reunited with them. We have a Western wing and then we would go to the ACC. We could easily be some of the bigger brands in the conference and get that extra pay. Then on the flip side, though, that could drive, if you get too many big brands that are going to steal all that additional revenue, and then like the Louisville or the legacy schools that in the ACC that no longer feel like they're the top brands again, maybe that would just push them out to the Big 12. So who knows? There's so many like paths that this could take, so many machinations of all of the scenarios that could happen, and so it's impossible to predict. But just kind of gaming it out in my mind, like I could see some of those old pack schools, maybe maybe not Arizona, I don't know, but maybe being interested in the ACC, depending on who's left behind. um, Having said that, the Big 12 could get really lucky. Let's say they're like, hey, we don't want to be here anymore in this conference. Like, you never know. Like, the Big 10 and the SEC, they might not want to get a whole lot bigger, in which case, a brand like a Miami, which makes a lot of sense for the SEC and makes a lot of sense for the Big 10, but also for some reasons isn't necessarily as good a fit. Like, if both those schools decide to pass on Miami, there's a chance that the Big 12 lucks out, and then Miami's easily the biggest, brand on paper in the Big 12. And then that would help bring, a little bit more legitimacy to the Big 12 as well.
Yeah, I think it'd help out a ton. I mean, we take would you take Cal and Stanford though if the ACC at some point goes, "Hey, you know what? Just not just not making sense." Would you do it? Yeah, I mean, for example, let's say West Virginia and Cincy join the ACC, and then all of a sudden, but in the retrospect, ACC goes, "We're going to Stanford and Cal." Do you slide those just straight into the Big 12? Just kind of do a swap?
So you're saying we lose our eastern flank, but then we take kind of the trade that was put out there on Twitter too, wasn't it? Which I think is great. I've done a trade before between conferences, a video on that a long time ago. I was mad that I didn't come up with that one first. Yeah, I don't know. The schools that we have are a better fit in the Big 12, not geographically. They also bring more, I think, athletically and more potential. Stanford, I mean, it doesn't seem like Cal has the same investment in the sports. Stanford, it's really the Olympic sports. And so then you're really banking on, hey, we just want to get into the Bay Area and be in California for time zone slots or whatever. But I don't know how much that adds. Like, if we really could do a trade straight up, I don't know if the Big 12 does that. And then if those schools leave and the Big 12's looking to backfill, but the ACC is locked in its other Eastern members, then you're looking at, maybe, because like I said, we were really excited to get a really bad Colorado team because it was a legitimate Power 5 school at the time. And there was the Deion Sanders factor. But I don't know. I, I just don't think they're a great fit. But maybe at that point, you're saying, hey, we're getting as many power brands in the conference as possible, and we have to do whatever we have to do to try and compete. I just don't know if they're additive enough. In terms to make it worth it. But again, you're doing anything to stay on pace the with the other two big conferences. And so I don't know. I don't really want to be in a conference with them, but I don't know. But it's a good question. So there's a lot of ways this could play out, but it's clear that the next big domino to fall is going to be from the ACC, because Memphis took probably the biggest shot that any other G5 program is going to be able to have to try to get in. UConn got close, and we've talked about all that. And the Big 12 said no. And it doesn't look like the ACC is looking to add any more schools. That's just going to start shrinking their pie, and they're trying to do the opposite there. So it really looks like that's going to be the next domino. And whether it's UNC or FSU or whoever, it's really going to start there. And so I think I think we have to wait until that happens, and the Big 12 is going to do its darndest to try to pick up the pieces from the ACC and build up with those before it starts looking to the G5 ranks. And if it gets to that point that you need to backfill with some G5 schools, those schools will still be there and they'll still be willing to join at that point. They're not going anywhere.
Yeah, I'd honestly rather add a San Diego State versus adding Cal. I know that probably seems blasphemous to a lot of people, but because one's currently a Power Four school and the other one's not. But San Diego State to me is a lot more appeal because of the proximity to Arizona State. In the San Diego market, which is a big market, regardless, they have really good facilities, but also they have competitive in both teams in both football and basketball. And right now, if we were going to add Memphis, I'd go, well, great. Their basketball arena and their basketball standards and their basketball practice facility are all top notch. They are a blue blood in basketball for sure. They've got Penny Hardaway, etc. But in football, I'm like, man, I've been to the Liberty Bowl. I used to work for the USFL where Memphis Showboats were playing out of there. It wasn't pretty, and I know they've renovated their stadium there, but still, it just is not going to be the same. I can't wait to travel to some of the other Big 12 schools in the country to see games at Arizona State, at Arizona, at BYU and Provo, at Utah, etc. that have been added to Big 12. Actually, weirdly, I've been to the Colorado Stadium. I've actually been to Arizona State, so just haven't seen a game there. But I'm not like looking forward to going to see Memphis, for example, if they were added. I wouldn't necessarily be looking forward to go to Berkeley. Would probably look forward to go to Palo Alto and Stanford, but like I'd love to go see a brand new Snapdragon Stadium in San Diego. I have a lot of San Diego ties, so I know this information. But yeah, to me, there's a lot more incentive for the Big 12 to add maybe one or two more teams, get to 18, and then stop it there. Because I'm with you. I don't think kind of like with the NBA expansion, where all the owners, like no one really wants to decrease their amount of money they're getting every single year from the TV contracts at this point. They don't want to slice the pie up anymore. They want to keep their 1/16 of a slice. They don't want it to move to a 1/18, especially in all this money era where Oklahoma State was going to do a bunch of renovations all throughout wrestling. Softball is getting a brand new stadium. There are a bunch more renovations coming to football and football practice facilities, all type of stuff. And it all is all just put to a screeching halt because all that announcement came like 6 months to a year right before all the NIL stuff became legitimately like it was going to happen. And Oklahoma State just decided, hey, softball, we're just putting that money towards NIL. I mean, the softball coach said it. And, football is not getting any brand new facilities. They probably could use some upgraded facilities always. But, wrestling's keeping their brand new wrestling room that they got. But that was part of renovations that were planned well before any NIL stuff. And that happened. But they're not going to get a hold of a new wrestling auxiliary gym anytime soon. That was part of the plan back in 2020. So, was all the money being diverted in different ways now and all the funds being reallocated now they can be to the NIL funds with the House settlement coming down? I'm curious to see here if any of these conferences will even look at adding teams anymore. I mean, if I'm the ACC, I'd love to add TCU and Baylor. Those would be my top two teams in the Big 12 to add because you already have SMU right there, and you have two other private Christian schools that you'd add to your conference. But I don't know if I don't know what you think. I don't know if you're the ACC or even the Big Ten or SEC, who would be the top two schools from the Big 12 right now you'd be trying to poach if you could?
Well,
Or
it
maybe top
depends. It
one or
depends on
whatever.
it depends on the conference, right? Because they kind of have different needs. I think the SEC really wants to be, having those contiguous states, and they're worried about brand there. I think for the SEC, someone like Kansas makes a lot of sense because it's still a big brand, more basketball than football, but they don't need another powerhouse football brand. And coming in basketball and further solidify their spot as a top conference in basketball, I think they'd like that. And then you bring in that border war rivalry in house, and then who else fits along with them? Like I don't think OU would want Oklahoma State. I don't, and then you start looking at well, who else is in there that's touching that makes sense, that feels like an SEC school. I just think the SEC is okay. Like I don't really see them going any further into Big 12 territory. The Big 10, Kansas is one that could make sense. They're not quite there academically, but still AAU, and they're there, fit a little bit better into that Midwest geographic footprint. And I still think those former Pac-12 schools are all probably on the table. They all fit a little bit better in what the Big Ten wants. I know TCU has been tied to different conferences at different times. I don't know if they fit as well culturally or just, being I know they're not like uber religious. They're not like BYU is, but still a private religious institution and a little bit smaller. So I don't know if that fits exactly what they're looking for. Or so unless they're just looking for, getting into Texas at, whatever cost. So I think, yeah, I mean, those would be the ones that I think would be most likely to go to one of those other two big conferences in terms of the Big Ten and SEC.
Yeah, I don't think the Big Ten adds anyone. They've got the most amount of teams in their conference now. So, I'm asking like a tough question that I know is probably never gonna get answered because they already have 18. I mean, ACC has 17 because they have Notre Dame for, kind of not officially, but kind of officially, and the
Actually,
Big
I think
12.
SMU takes them to 17, right? And then
Well,
so they're like 17.5, right?
yeah, it's kind of what I'm saying here. It's like there's 17 teams for football because there's 16.5, if I'm understanding it correctly here. Because they would be 17 if they added Notre Dame for football, but instead they just have Notre Dame for every other sport. If I have that correct here. But then Big 12 and SEC are both 16 teams. So who's gonna? It seems like some stuff could slide around a little bit, but I don't think any college is really looking at adding a power, a group of 5 team at this point.
Yeah. Um, oh yeah. I don't think so either. And there's no one that fits. Maybe an SFU or USF. Sorry. Uh, Perhaps because of the academics and being Florida, whatnot. But again, I think it all comes down to those top brands in the ACC, and the ACC isn't looking to expand anymore. Those other schools would be, if and when schools leave the ACC, then they'll start looking at backfilling. And the SEC and the Big Ten, it just comes down to how big do they want to get, and I think they'll only keep expanding with brands that are big enough to help offset any, split of their pie that really add to their brand. And so that's why we're looking at a Florida State, Clemson, UNC, and then some of the others. Those are the top three that are like, okay, those three will most likely, if they want to leave the ACC, they will most likely have a home in one of those two other conferences. Then there's reasons for and against them in any conference. I would say UNC is the only one that like really makes, I think, perfect sense in both both of those two conferences. But um I don't know. So it might come down to what they want to do. Whereas like Florida State, does the Big Ten, it doesn't fit the Big Ten perfectly in terms of what they're looking for. Whereas the SEC, it's a better fit, but it's almost too good of a fit because then you're splitting, you're sharing that geography with Florida, and Florida may not want FSU. So you run into that. UNC doesn't really have that, and they're like a state neither one of those schools is in. They fit academically, they fit brand wise, and so they're really well positioned. So it might be UNC that sets off that domino. Um, and really depending on which of those two conferences, I imagine both of them end up wanting UNC and where UNC wants to go, and it might depend on who wants to take their partner with them. Is it UVA? Is it Duke? Is it, if they say we don't care, we just want to bring someone with us and we'll go. And so again, depending on how all that plays out, um, maybe teams usually seem to go in pairs. So I imagine at least 4 schools would leave the ACC, but is it more than that? I just don't know. I don't know if there's enough spots to, for these two conferences to keep growing too much bigger. At some point, it just will stop making sense. I already think it's stopped making sense. I already think conferences are too big, including the Big 12. We're just too big where you can't play other schools in the conference nearly frequently enough. And I think that is a shame, and it hurts the conferences. It hurts, building the rivalries. And like I think of BYU and ASU, like some stuff went down last year. There's some rivalries. Levitt's brother, was on BYU, doesn't like BYU, had some choice words this year. It got BYU fans riled up the way the game ended, and BYU really wanted another shot at ASU. It didn't happen, and so that would have been great to see a rematch. And we just don't get them on the schedule this year. Like, you don't have a chance to build off of that momentum. And then when they do play each other, and another year or two, then maybe enough of the players are gone. Like, it's just not the same anymore. So anyway, yeah, I don't think we'll see a whole lot more. I do think it all hinges on those ACC schools, but which ones go where is going to determine, I think, a lot of that's going to set off the rest of those dominoes. And then when the ACC, if they are able to keep its members but not able to peel away Big Ten, forcing them to look to the group of five, then who fits academically? Are they going to try to maintain those standards? Or are they going to say West Virginia, UCF, or whoever, you're not where we want to be academically? Or are they going to say, hey, you know what? We'll take West Virginia, we'll take Memphis, we'll take all these schools because we're just worried about staying alive and we have to rebrand, much like the Pac-12 did. Washington State and Oregon State weren't sticking their nose up at San Diego State anymore, not at Boise State. These programs have been trying to get into their conference for a very long time. Two schools, which if the Big 12 did have to add other G5 schools, they'd be high up on my list, mostly just because they've had great rivalries with BYU over the years. Not saying they're necessarily the most qualified. I think a lot of schools, Memphis, whoever, Tulane, have strong arguments as well, UConn. But for me personally, I would love to see them in a conference with BYU again. Okay, so we've gone on a lot of different topics about this. We kind of covered the gamut here, but I want to get to, we have been talking about Big Ten and SEC, so I do want to hit upon a couple things here. They're both coming off of media days and had some things that really suggest where their mindsets are at, which is funny because I think we always talk about them. A lot of times they're talked about as the power two or whatever. We think about them in lockstep, trying to shut everybody else out. But we're seeing some distinct differences here, and both of them kind of infuriating in their own way. And so it's funny to see them disagree, and yet both of them I find obnoxious for different reasons. So I'm not sure how closely you followed this, but let's start with the SEC. Sankey says, talking about their scheduling, they have obviously an 8-game conference schedule. They won't move off of that, and they've always got those cupcake games. But we'll get into that. So Sankey says it is absolutely, fully, 100% correct that in the SEC we play 8 conference games while some others play 9 conference games. Some others, basically everybody else. Never been a secret. Second, it's also correct that last season all 16 members of the SEC played at least 9 games against what you would label power opponents. So that in quotes. And so for me, he wants to separate the SEC as better than the Big 12, better than the ACC, and just the best conference in general. I mean, they're obviously competing against the Big 10 most directly, but they kind of want to put us on a different tier. But then when it's convenient for them to talk about their schedule, oh, but we still played 9, some schools 10 against power opponents, so when it's convenient for him, it's like what you might call power. So he's kind of hedging there while not fully giving us the benefit of the doubt, calling us power programs, but also trying to get the benefit of having us on their schedule. So what do you make of that?
I think it's laughable because, for example, you've got Texas this year. Texas plays 4 teams that are non-conference. Of course, that's how the schedule works, right? They play Ohio State. I'll give them credit. They go to Columbus. Ohio State's not an easy place to play. National champion, reigning national champ, all type of stuff here. But the other 3 non-conference games that Texas has are against San Jose State University, Sam Houston, and UTEP. All at home, by the way, too. And Oklahoma State, in retrospect here, we have 3 non-conference games. 2 are the same kind of Cupcake here. They're UT Martin and Tulsa. Like, I'm not trying to say Oklahoma State doesn't play cupcakes, but then we play 9 other games in conference that are all gonna be tough conference games. We go to Arizona, we play, we 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 play all the Big 12 schools, basically. And
Well,
then you've got
and don't you play Oregon?
yeah, well, and that's the point. Yeah, we go to Oregon this year, right? Like we're also playing we're playing 10, you know? So, yeah, Sankey can say, "Hey, we're playing 9 power 4 teams." Well, cool. Big 10, Big 12, every Big 12 school is playing 10. So, I think the Big 12 is facing tougher competition, and I'm curious to see here. Brett Yormark has really dug his feet in here on like, hey, we're always going to play 10. We're always going to play one non-conference. That's a power four team, and then the rest are all going to be 9 conference games. I'm curious how much longer that keeps happening because at some point, somebody's going to go, well, if the SEC is going to get in 5 teams a year in the college football playoff, and they're only playing 8 conference games. Why are we playing 9 conference games if we're getting in 1 to 2 teams? We're the Big 12 or the ACC for that matter. Big 10, I don't think they'll change it, but I'm really curious to see here if the Big 12 or if the ACC go, yeah, why wouldn't we just go ahead and just say, yeah, let's also play Sam Houston? Like we're playing right now. We're playing, a Power 5 opponent or Power 4 opponent. I mean, OU this year they play Michigan. That's their non-conference opponent. Well, Michigan won't be easy, but it's at home. And then the other 3 teams Oklahoma plays out of conference, Illinois State, Temple, and just during the season, randomly they play Kent State in October. Like, all right, well, just go ahead and give them another bye week at that point. What are we doing here? It seems to me that the SEC should at least go, all right, we're going to play all of our non-conference games going to be first 4 weeks of the season. We're not going to let, Citadel is not going to play Alabama in November, for example. I remember that happened a couple years ago, or at least October, and I was just going, what is the deal here? Yeah, I mean, just how do you have it during the season? You get to play a non-conference game, you get to put in your backups in the third quarter, and do whatever. I'm not trying to say the whole deal. They are lining up line of scrimmage against another 11 guys. It's not completely against no one, but it's when it gets to play Kent State, in your OU, and Google Images came and pull up a Kent State logo for their football schedule. Like, come on, something's got to happen here. I know they're the Golden Flashes, but Google can't get the logo together. You're probably playing a really bad team at that point.
So we'll get into the Big Ten because I've got some issues with them too. But Indiana head coach Kurt Signetti says so talking about canceling their series against UVA. We're not talking about an ACC powerhouse. We're not. I mean, technically a power program, but we're not talking about a world beater. I mean, they've been very down, and Indiana has canceled them to schedule. Oh, I should have them in front of me, but some cupcakes. I mean, we're talking ultimate cupcakes here. So for him to take a dig at the SEC is rich, right? It's like Indiana. Well, again, I'll get into the SEC, but I do want to show um, this in response to his quote. He showed the SEC gauntlet, and yeah, so this is 12 of the SEC schools and who they're playing out of conference. And yeah, they do, and they schedule it smartly because one of those cupcakes is always in November, usually before their rivalry game, giving them a week to get a little bit of extra rest, essentially giving them a bye. And it's smart. It's within the rules. They are essentially rigging it in their favor, and that's fine. But this needs to be taken into account. You can't just say, "Hey, the only," because then it becomes an echo chamber. Because you say, "Oh, look at who we've played," but if all your schools have only really played each other and haven't played outside competition, then you can't really prove anything on that. You can't say, well, yeah, well, we also went into the Big Ten and beat this school. We went to the Big 12 and beat this school, who's, at the top of their conferences. It's, hey, we beat, Eastern Michigan, we beat Alcorn State and whatever. And then you have nothing. And then they say, yeah, but I played Florida. Well, how do we know Florida's good? Who did well, Florida's a bad example because they're not on this list. And I do want to give credit to Alabama. They usually have one really big matchup to start out of conference matchup to start the season. But you say like, oh well, we beat Oklahoma. Yeah, who did Oklahoma play? Nobody. Or Auburn. It's like, so how do these schools prove that they're good if they're only playing each other? And because the conferences are so big, they're not even playing each other. There's a chance that the best schools miss each other, and that your your schedule rather is loaded up with bottom portion of the SEC, and those schools haven't played anybody. So how do you really prove who's good? It's like last year, Georgia almost lost to Kentucky, but yet Georgia gets the benefit of the doubt because it's Georgia, and they struggled a lot at times throughout the season. So it's like the SEC has it gamed. They know they're going to win the preseason with the best recruits, and so that's going to give them the best leg up in the preseason rankings and all the stuff. And then they've anchored the conversation, because that's the thing that's really frustrating for me is at the end of the day, if you're starting at number 2, even if you drop, it's gonna you're starting at that point and you're still going to be viewed as a good team. It takes a long time. Like Michigan, it took a long time for them to start dropping out of the top 10 last year, and they still wiped the floor with Alabama with all the struggles they had, versus somebody who has to, like an Arizona State, who has to work their way up. It's a lot harder to work your way in there. And so, yeah, I have a lot of issues with this. My one thing I will say on the flip side is if they go to 9 conference games, yes, it's going to be tougher for them, but they're still not scheduling the Big 12. They will schedule ACC because they have a lot of regional rivalries, but they have one more conference game. That's one less game that they have to schedule someone from the Big 12, which means there's fewer opportunities for the Big 12 to go out there and prove itself against SEC competition in the out of conference slate. So what do you make of that?
You're not going to believe who OU plays the week after they play Kent State. I mean, it's just funny at this point. It's the Red River rivalry. They play Texas the week after they play Kent State. It's just, but Oklahoma State's playing. We play Arkansas. We played Arkansas last year, won in double overtime against not a good Arkansas team that it turned out to be not be a great team, but we turned out to be not good at all. And then we also have Alabama on the schedule here later on too. So we're scheduling as Oklahoma State fans, like, are kind of going, man, what is this year going to look like? Well, the future years here don't look that great either, because the non-conference opponents we've got lined up are all Power 4 teams, like one a year. And
Yeah,
if I'm the SEC, I'm going, or really if I'm the NCAA and I'm trying to make some type of universal law or rule, it's you've got to play at least one Power 4 team non-conference every single year. Like Texas, like all of this SEC gauntlet photo, the only thing this misses is that Mississippi State, there's 3 opponents that are listed non-conference. Well, there's one other opponent they play non-conference, and I'm going to guess Mississippi State plays like somebody really good. I mean, Texas, they have 3 opponents here: San Jose State, UTEP, Sam Houston State. If remember for a couple months ago when I just said they also play Ohio State. Like Ohio State's not listed on the SEC gauntlet, graphic here for Texas, because they all play 4 non-conference games. You're going to list the 3 worst ones to make this graphic. That's great.
yeah, good point.
And it's a good graphic because, yeah, Kentucky gets to play Toledo, Eastern Michigan, and Tennessee Tech. Well, they only need to play 3 more games to all of a sudden make a bowl game. Like, come on, what are we doing? You think Oklahoma State was scheduling Oregon like 7 years ago, going, you know what? I bet they'll have a down year then. No, Oklahoma State was scheduling Oregon to hopefully boost the Big 12 image overall early on in the season. Because you're right. Oklahoma State could have forecasted 7 years ago and gone, you know what? We're scheduling Oregon. Hopefully they're good that year. And hopefully we're also good. So when we play Oregon, we go there and we play them. Hopefully we beat them. And that'll get us some credibility to be in the top 25. And hopefully we can work our way up there. But if we lose against Oregon, kind of no harm, no foul, because no one's going to rank us in the top 25 probably in 2025 anyways. Yeah, preseason wise. And that's kind of a bold claim. 7 years ago, Oklahoma State was always in the top 25, like preseason wise, or at least say half the years in the 2010 to 2020 range. So I think it's so bizarre here how the SEC is able to schedule just only 8 conference opponents when they have a 16-team conference.
Yeah.
You've got the availability in your schedule. You could do it. It's not like you only have, 9 teams in the conference, so you can only play against 8 other teams. Like you can do it, SEC. You can figure it out.
Yeah, they definitely should. And to be fair, like BYU doesn't have the toughest out of conference schedule right this year, but they're also not incentivized. But you look at what the Big 12 does. So when the SEC sets it up so everyone can have a bye week, before their rivalry game, the Big 12 puts BYU and Utah in the middle of the season, one, and like, which is crazy to me because that is a marquee matchup. But then two, it's such a game, the emotional game takes so much after you, whether you win or lose, you are beat up, you're banged up, and it is tough to go into that next game. And BYU follows up the Holy War with going to Iowa State. Fortunately, there's a bye week after that. And then at Texas Tech, then followed up with getting TCU at home. So this is the toughest stretch of BYU schedule by far. And you get all four of those back to back to back, and that's crazy. So the Big 12 was not doing BYU any favors with this. And so it would be something to see the Big 12 be a little more calculated with, hey, how do we set this up to allow some of our best teams to put them in the best situation to win games so we don't all beat each other up by the end of it. And so I understand why the SEC sets it up this way because they want to, take advantage of it. It just infuriates me. And Satake at Media Day said, I think all of the power conferences, you should play one school from each of the conferences. You got 3 out of conference games and you play one school from ACC, one school from SEC, one school from Big Ten. And he thinks all the conferences should do that. Now, you're never going to get them on board. That would be great, though. Honestly, then you get rid of the cupcakes. If everyone gets rid of the cupcakes, then we're all on even footing, right? You don't have to say, oh, but, they get a cupcake. No, we all would remove those cupcakes. I know there's other issues with including G5, and that's how, some of the FCS, they get a big paycheck and whatnot, but and that's all part of college football. But I'd love to see something like that. And with conferences being, as you mentioned, conferences being so big, it's like you've got to use as many games as possible to allow these teams to play each other to get those rematches and whatnot. So anyway, wild stuff there from the SEC, which is just anyway, pretty nuts, pretty infuriating to see them continue to game the system and just win the media battle, and they're going to keep doing that. All right, we're going a little long here. I do want to get to a few more things. I said we'd get to the Big Ten. I think it's crazy what Cignetti said, or what Indiana did, but they're also saying, oh, well, we've got to schedule easy games. Well, it must have been because they saw what happened last year when they had a really easy schedule and they got the benefit of the doubt. And the only real team they played, granted, went on to win the national championship, but beat them. But I would have loved for BYU to have had a chance to play Indiana last year because Indiana didn't prove to me that they necessarily belonged in the playoff. And so for the Big Ten to whine, they have so many quotes. Listen to this from Tony Petitti. Says, if you are 6-3 in the Big Ten, that's a great record. If you stumbled in a non-conference games, I don't know why that disqualifies you. So talking about being 6-3 and stumbling in non-conference games. So you're talking about a team with 4 losses from the Big Ten is needing to be in the playoff. Like at what point, like the playoff is going to lose all meaning. What's it going to mean anymore? Like teams should have to prove it out there. Does that mean that good teams won't get in? Yes. But that is why you have to win the games ahead of you. And that's what keeps the regular season special. If we're starting to say, yeah, you can you can lose 3 games and a non-conference game. Well, one, if you're not scheduling anybody tough in your non-conference, and then there's only like 3 really good teams in the Big Ten. I guess they're a little deeper now that they've added the Pac schools. But like if those 3 losses are on your schedule are Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, so you're like the classic, like, Wisconsin or Iowa or whatever, right? You come in after those guys and you're the next one up. Like you've shown that you are not as good as the 3 best teams in your conference this season, like, what makes you think that you deserve, that you should not be penalized, and that you need a spot to be in the playoff to play for a national championship? Like, that's just crazy to me. Like, that's why we have the regular season. That's why we're playing these games, is to determine who the best is. We need the best from these conferences. And granted, there will be, 1 or 2 other schools that will get a shot at the playoff, but because they didn't win their conference, I don't think they should just be handed that or be guaranteed that. And so that goes to these playoff spots. And I want to read one more quote real quick, and then I want to get your opinion on the playoffs. But Jed Fish, former Big 12 coach, is saying it's imperative, talking about the Big Ten, we need 4 automatic bids, a 9-game schedule in the Big Ten Conference. We can't leave it up to chance with a 5-11 combo. So I love that he takes a shot at the SEC, but he's saying we can't leave it up to chance. Like, we have to have 4 automatic bids. Like, granted, yes, the conferences are so big, but that's your own fault. Like, you made your conference this big. It didn't have to be this big to where, you're not even all playing each other, and that you feel like you need that. But also, like, you're in 4th place in your own conference out of 16, 18, whatever, however many schools. You're in 4th place. So yeah, you're good, but you're still in 4th place, and you're saying, oh, we have to be guaranteed a spot. Like, that just blows my mind. So obviously, I think as Big 12 fans, we hate the idea of a 4-4-2-2-1, whatever the model is, where Big 12 is guaranteed 2 spots, and the ACC 2 spots, and the other conferences 4 spots. But and Brett Yormark has come out against this time and again, and the other, at Big 12 Media Day, they were all in line with this, saying, no, we need to play it on the field. Do you think that's a smart strategy, or do you think the Big 12 will be lucky to get 2 teams in the playoff in some years, and that we should just take what we can get? Because I see both arguments.
I think no matter what, it's got to be going forward. It's got to be the Big 12 gets 2 in, the ACC gets 2 in, then you leave the other 4, other 4 for each, and then that's it, right? I mean, 4 plus 4 plus 2 plus 2, all of a sudden you're at 12, and that's the 12-team playoff, and a group of 5 team doesn't get in, or a group of 5 team could take one of the SEC or one of the Big 10 spots. Like, last year, 4 Big 10 teams got in. The 4th or 3rd or 4th place team ended up winning the whole thing. Good for them, but Ohio State was ranked 8th. They beat the crap out of a Tennessee team that had a quarterback transfer this offseason, because he wasn't getting paid enough. Like, there's just so many different things going on here. So, I mean, is Nico Imaliava like that great? We don't know. Like, we just don't know how good Ohio State was when they played the national championship game, because when they lost to Michigan, it didn't matter that much. It's like, oh, they lose to Michigan. It's fine. It just, like you said, it just devalued the regular season so much. I want to make sure that college football does not go the full way of the NFL, even though it seems like we're halfway there right now. You're paying players. All right, check. I'm all good with that. Get the bag. The schools are making money off of you. Get paid. But are we going to make it where all of a sudden it's like a 17-game schedule where, all right, yeah, you can lose like 2 weeks. Like, you're telling me if Ohio State and Texas play a really, really lopsided game, Texas, let's say, for example, loses like 30-0. Oh, well, by the end of the season, that game won't matter diddly squat. Whereas in the Big 12, if Oklahoma State played Texas non-conference week 1 and Oklahoma State lost that game, there'd be zero talk. Even if Oklahoma State went undefeated the rest of the season, it'd be only if they won the conference. I mean, on a tiebreak or whatever, which I guess is how it works. It just seems like the Big 12 and the ACC should at least be getting 2 teams in. If the Big 10 and the SEC are going to get in 4 or more automatically. I mean, I'm hearing rumors that like it's going to be a 5 team from the ICC. That seems crazy. In the ACC last year, like I said, they got the last 2 teams in, but they got 2 teams in. I mean, they got 2 slices of the pie here. They had SMU and Clemson, who both lost in their first game. So I don't know. I'm
BYU beat SMU and wasn't even as much in the conversation as other schools that were on the fringe. So they were looking at that last spot. They were looking at Alabama, who ended up getting destroyed by a, I would say, mediocre Michigan team. Then they were talking about SMU, who BYU beat in Dallas. In other schools in Miami, and BYU was kind of just not really in that conversation. So it's crazy. So you like having the guaranteed spots going, expanding to 16 playoff spots, doing a 4-4-2-2-1, and then having some at
just
large.
just just give more Big 12 teams a shot. That's all it is to me. Because like Iowa State plays Arizona State for the Big 12 championship. Iowa State doesn't show up in the first quarter, and that's it. Done. That's the whole conference. Iowa State has one bad quarter because basically, and you know what? Shout out to Arizona State. They kept the gas pedal up to the floor, then won the Big 12 championship pretty easily. But there's just so many. When you already have 12 weeks going on this season, there's just so many ups and downs that can go on. And all of a sudden, when Notre Dame's not in an official conference, but there's 12 teams in the playoff every year, it seems like Notre Dame's basically got an auto bid as long as they win 10 games. Like, you're telling me if Notre Dame doesn't win, like, if they win 10 games this year, they're gonna go to the playoff. They win 10 games, even if they don't play anyone. And because they're a non-conference team, like, they just don't have a conference. So they don't where does Notre Dame fit into all of this? I mean, it just seems absurd here that I'm not going, yeah, hey, Big Ten, you actually had 5 teams because Notre Dame's basically a team in your conference. Or ACC, you had 3 because Notre Dame's basically a team in your conference in every sport but football. And the Big 12 is getting screwed here. I think we're just getting screwed the most out of this deal. Like, every single team that hosted that had a bye lost. But we're not talking about Georgia versus Notre Dame. We're not talking about Ohio State versus Oregon. We're instead talking about Arizona State. Oh, they almost upset Texas. That would have been great if they had pulled it off. Well, Texas then got thumped by Ohio State. So Notre Dame played Penn State, who beat Boise State. And Boise State played Penn State pretty close. So but pretty close isn't it? So I don't know. I just think the Big 12 needs more options, more chances to play in the college football playoff overall, and in whatever way we can get that, I'm all for.
Yeah, I understand that, but I like that your mark's like, hey, we're not going to accept that we are lesser than you guys. And we're not going to just give you that and say, yep, you get 4. One, it's not an invitational, it is a playoff. Like, conference champions, great. But going beyond that, then you take the best teams, which those two conferences, Big Ten and SEC, for them to like be so adamant about these additional spots is crazy because they get the benefit of the doubt in the media anyway. They are getting the benefit of the doubt for these spots. We looked at Alabama overpassing FSU 2 years ago, right? For that 4th playoff spot. Like, these schools are getting the benefit of the doubt already. And so for the Big Ten, like you said, get all those spots in this first year of the 12 format and then still be so whiny and talk about, oh, we should be able to have lots of losses and still get teams in because our conference is so tough. First of all, your conference is not that tough. It's very top heavy, but it has gotten somewhat tougher, as it's gotten bigger, but then it's so big, you're not all playing each other. For me, in a perfect world, and I've done videos on this, I'll probably do more videos on this. I think conferences need to be 10 at 10 teams max, or not max, just lock everyone in at 10. That gives everybody 9 conference games. You're playing everybody in your conference. And in basketball, you're playing 18. You're playing a home and away versus everybody. But you're playing in football, everybody in your conference every year, and you can come away with a clear-cut winner. There will be years where it's tiebreakers. You can still do a conference championship game. We saw Big Ten did that for years they still had the round robin, but then they still had the championship game, and you can name a champion. And there will be some controversy because there will be tiebreakers that have to determine the 2 teams that make it into that conference championship game. So no matter what, there's going to be some team that's going to have a gripe. But at the end, you're going to have a clear-cut champion from every single conference. And then you can't complain because it's like, hey, we played our conference, all these games were meaningful, and we're taking the best team, the team that is going to represent our conference and go to this playoff. And then depending on how big you get, maybe there's some at larges too, in which case it's still going to lean in favor of conferences like the SEC or whatever. So I think that would be the perfect model in my mind. Now, it's not going to happen. Like, that's much more like a Project Rudy type of a thing, which I'm all for. But I think that's the only way, because even as it is, like, we say, oh, well, we need votes. Well, voters are going to be susceptible, and the media and whatever, to it's going to bias these bigger conferences. Well, we want strength of schedule. Well, all these numbers, I think I want it numbers to influence it, but then the numbers are also influenced by rankings, which are influenced by voters, which are also influenced by recruiting classes, which are impacted by people who are making decisions, who are also influenced by this media. So it's just like this loop that continues to feed itself. So there's not like a perfect situation if you are using some sort of selection process other than playing it on the field. And I think that is the selection process that you need. And then you'd get representation. Things would be more regional. Then it would be fun, because then it'd be like, you're not getting, oh yeah, well, we play East Coast and West Coast in conference games all the time. No, it would be a lot of fun to be like, oh, we get to see this West Coast team play this East Coast team, and in this fun matchup in this playoff representing their two groups. Like, I think that's exciting to me. And that's a lot of fun. Watching a conference game between Rutgers and UCLA is not exciting for anybody. Now, if they both rise to the top of their conferences and play in the playoff, then yeah, that's cool. But as a conference game, there's no intrigue for anybody.
Yeah, I really the completely across the country games have to be studied in the amount of like watch hours here after a couple of years, more years go by, and we get some more information, I guess, just to make sure. But I can't think that many people are tuning in for a noon kickoff of Georgia Tech versus Stanford. I just can't think that that's happening that often, to be honest. Overall, it would shock me greatly if there was a ton of intrigue, or if there are even opponents who are able to go like. Can you imagine families here going to games? I know a big, huge recruiting tool for Oklahoma State when Gundy started with Oklahoma State was going down to Houston and saying, "Hey, your son's going to play in this state, your home state here, and you're going to be in driving hours of seeing your son play at least 4 games a year, no matter what. We're going to be down here." And that was when the Big 12 used to be 12 teams, and there used to be two divisions, North, South, etc. Now what's the pitch of a team being able to recruit in Texas or even in New York if you're Stanford or Cal? Hey, yeah, we might come to Rutgers. Like, all right, cool. And vice versa. I really just think this just makes every school have to really specialize what they want to do. Like earlier you said, Stanford, yep, they are completely an Olympic school. So would it be great to have Stanford in the conference for the Big 12? Probably not, honestly, because I can't think there's that many Big 12 teams who want to devote a lot of recruiting resources to this Palo Alto area, to San Francisco area, and really try to be there and kind of monopolize it because you may play Stanford, when your son's in college before they transfer. If they transfer, I guess, too. It just seems like a really tough deal to fix. I love the 10 teams per conference deal. Somebody would get screwed. There'd be somebody who'd be like, "Hey, we're Texas Tech and Baylor wouldn't be in the same conference. They've got to have the kind of the butt rivalry going on there. TCU and Baylor might be kind of devoid of it. I'm thinking of other Big 12 schools who would be, kind of mixed up. But then again, you might also have like Louisville and West Virginia back in the same conference, which would be a lot of fun too. So
I
I
actually
don't
have a
know.
video on all this. I've got it perfect, at least in my mind, the perfect conference makeup for all these to uh, quash all your concerns. But you make a good point, because you look at West Virginia and how they struggled after joining the Big 12. They're not what they were prior to that, and a lot of it has been they haven't had that same recruiting prowess locally, and then the traveling, and you're going to these other states outside of your footprint. Like, that was a real time example of how tough it can be. And I think I mean, even Nebraska, now they were already down a little bit, but they were coming off, like, this was like, um, they were still pretty good. Not like the powerhouse that they used to be, when they joined the Big Ten, but look at where they've fallen off, and that's still kind of within their footprint. Granted, they didn't have Texas anymore. Rutgers was never good, but joining the Big Ten didn't help, and that's there's only a couple teams that they really had to that were difficult. Like they should have had a chance to break through. Maryland, I think, got worse. Again, also not really a powerhouse, but I feel like they got worse more than not in the Big Ten. So it's just interesting to pull teams out of their natural geographic, um, you know, uh, conferences and then go to a new region and have to try to keep up. And it looks like they've struggled, and it hasn't been a recipe for success. Now there's certain brands that are big enough to, I think, overcome that, at least for a time, that have enough money, especially with NIL, that have big enough cachet. You're still going to see a USC and an Oregon do well. Texas and OU are always going to be able to have the clout. Plus, they're a little bit closer to the SEC. That's not so far um, out of their region. But I think not. I think most schools would have a difficult time trying to keep up with that. So, yeah, it is a mess. I'm really curious to see how all this shakes out with the playoff and where it leaves the Big 12, because access is the thing. And the best thing that the Big 12 can keep doing now is just winning, keep getting better. And you have to win, especially if you have a power opponent, especially the SEC or Big 10. If you play them out of conference, you've got to win that. You've got to show up and play big. Now, granted, Oregon's coming in as a top team, and Oklahoma State is kind of the opposite end of things. But if I think Oklahoma State can at least go in and make a good showing of it. Now, they're not going to get a lot of credit for it, and that's going to be hard to say when you're looking at W's and L's at the end of the season to put conferences up against each other. But I think there can be a moral victory there in just showing up and competing head to head with Oregon.
Yeah, I gotta say, if Oklahoma State ends up playing Oregon really tough and at the end only loses by 3, I'm gonna say hang the banner. You know,
Yeah.
hey, we put the crown on. All of a sudden, we're going to play Tulsa, and we're at least we only lost to Oregon by 3 because I mean, this is not going to be a great year for Oklahoma State football. This could be a good year, or it could be a bad year. But there are 2 quarterbacks battling out for the starting spot that have thrown 0 pass attempts in college football. So it'll be fun. It'll be exciting. It'll be a really interesting game against Oregon for Oklahoma State fans. But it will not be a game that I look forward to playing on the day of. And I'm like, man, can't wait to see if we can knock them off. Because I'll leave room for it in my brain just so I'm not completely stumped. But I wonder what the odds will be on the day of the game. Yeah, I mean, it's also the second game of the season. It's not like it's the last game. And I'd be curious here to see what you think about having some of these non-conference games here against Power Four teams, because we had that would had to be the stipulation here, where you're still playing a higher level opponent this deep in the season. But like, if Oklahoma State could somehow figure out a way to play Oregon the week after we play at Utah, which I don't think we do this year, but this is all an example, just kind of for example here. Like Oklahoma State goes to play Arizona, that's a 14-hour drive from Oklahoma City. Because I have looked it up to see would it be fun to go to. It'd be fun to go to, but it's a 14-hour drive. Like I'm not making that in a weekend. So why doesn't Oklahoma State just stay around there and just play Oregon the next week? I mean, it just seems like it wouldn't work. There's flying so easy now for all the teams and that type of stuff here. But if you're really looking at it from kind of a take a step away perspective here, like why not play some of these Power Four teams later on in the season? So at least teams like Oklahoma State here, who have so much roster turnover and so many new guys in the transfer portal coming in as well too, have some time to gel before all of a sudden we're playing Oregon the second week of the season. We play them after we play UT Martin. I mean, that'll hit us like a ton of bricks. At least we've got kind of 10 days off because we play UT Martin on a Thursday, but it'll be tough nonetheless. It's Oregon.
Yeah. Well, best of luck to you and to all the Big 12 schools in their out of conference matchups. Hopefully, we have a good showing and can represent the conference well this year. We don't completely eat our own while we face each other, but nonetheless, it will be interesting to continue to monitor the college football landscape as it changes, as the playoff changes, as NIL and all those rules around all that continue to change, and how that's going to impact us. And fortunately, I feel like Brett Yormark is doing everything he can to keep the Big 12 relevant and put us in the best position going forward. And hopefully, they make the best decision for the sport as a whole, and don't completely destroy and everything that we love about college football. And that's my biggest fear. So much of it already has been lost and changed. And change is fine. I don't want to be the old man on my porch, yelling at kids to get off my lawn. But also, I'm kind of that guy, so I'll just own it. Like, I don't love all this change, and I think a lot of it's bad for the sport, and there's some good things too. So, anyway, well, Cal, thanks so much for coming on. Go ahead and plug your shows again, and remind everyone where we can catch you.
For the time
Besides,
being,
the
yeah.
locker room in Boone Pickens Stadium.
Well, I do work in Stillwater, so I do cover the team. But I will say my office is across the street from Boone Pickens Stadium, where it's always a good sight to see every time driving in and out of work. But go follow at the CJ Tour on wherever you listen to podcasts, and X and Instagram and Blue Sky and Threads and TikTok, and
Got it
I
all.
I think MySpace. I think it's still got a MySpace page. So yeah, follow out the CJ Tour everywhere you listen to podcasts, everywhere on social media. Send us some questions here. Love to hear from all the BYU fans. And I was rewatching the last two times we played BYU, and they're close games no matter what. So double overtime win for Oklahoma State at home, and a 3-point win for BYU at home last year. So, and I gotta say, last year the best Big 12 game we played the whole season was at BYU. Provo looked insane. Wish I had gone to the game, but kind of glad, I guess, in retrospect, I didn't, because it was a tough when we lose our quarterback in the second quarter. But yeah, thanks so much for having me on, Trevor. Really appreciate it. And go Pokes. Can't wait for the next one here.
All right, go Cougs.